समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Mehul Choksi, one of India's most prominent fugitives, and definitely, probably at this point, the biggest fugitive by market cap. By market cap, in the sense of amount of money that is owed to the banks, that the person owes to the banks. I'm not counting Vijay Mallya there. I have to be very careful because Vijay Mallya, whatever the cases against him, has actually paid back everything that he owed the banks and more. That is something that he keeps saying all the time. His legal issues apart and his cases that he's facing apart, because cases can have their own logic, but as far as the money is concerned, that's been paid for. Today, if you look around, all the Indian bank fugitives or India's debt fugitives or loan fugitives, Mehul Choksi is probably the biggest. The reason he's making headlines today is that the Belgian government has arrested him. They've arrested him because he's a wanted man in India. He's applying for bail. He has access to his counsel. The Belgians say chances are he will get bail at some point. India has quickly moved in for extradition and that process will start. Now, there is a certain edge to this because from Western countries, it's not easy to get extradition, to get your own criminals extradited. In fact, even terrorists, India has had a tough time. What has changed now is the extradition of Tahavur Rana, because with that the Americans have given a signal which is not so easy to ignore for the rest of the developed world also. And whatever commotion might have taken place since Trump took over a couple of months back, the fact is that these are all American allies. So one takes the cue from the other. So India also is more hopeful of getting Mehul Choksi back. He claims he's got blood cancer, he's very sick, he doesn't have long to live. But let us see. However, what this does is this brings back to us the story of bank thefts. Bank thefts not as in robberies, but as in rich and powerful people borrowing money from the banks and not returning. Many just don't return. They go bankrupt. They lose their companies now with the bankruptcy process. But some of the others have just escaped from India. And most of these are people who really had no collateral. They had no collateral, they had no assets to seek loans against. So they allegedly, until the case is settled by courts, allegedly took loans or got banks to give them loans on allegedly fraudulent grounds, to say that I have this asset or I am employing this money there or I am sending out this money, open me a letter of credit, my payments are coming. That's what happened mostly in the case of Mehul Choksi and also his nephew. Nirav Modi, who we all know well, he is in prison in UK as we speak now. He has also been fighting very hard to prevent his extradition, but right now he's imprisoned awaiting his extradition proceedings. Between the two of them, how much money is owed to the Indian banking system? Mehul Choksi has 6 CBI cases against him and 1 ED case against him. He owes, his company was Gitanjali Gems. He owns, and maybe some others, he owns India's banks, mostly nationalized banks, 12,920 crore rupees, right? That's nearly 13,000 crore rupees. Nirav Modi, because every day the meter's running, interest meter's running. Nirav Modi has 2 CBI cases, 1 ED case against him. He owes India's banks 6,900 crores. Between the two of them, 13,600 crores is owed just to Punjab National Bank, India's what used to be India's second largest public sector bank. Now it's the third largest marginally because Bank of Baroda has left it behind. One reason PNB has fallen to number 3 slot is also because of the setback they suffered with these lendings, which were totally fraudulent. You can see this. There was no collateral, there was no business. That is the case that CBI and ED have also made out. Within this, within this 13,600 crores, 6,097 crores is owed by Mehul Choksi, and the rest, which is just a little over 7,000 crores, is owed by Nirav Modi. So Mama and Bhanja, between them, effectively divided up what they allegedly stole from Punjab National Bank, half and half, right? It's a fair deal, half and half from one bank. The important thing is this was a public sector bank, and that is something that we'll talk about a little bit in a little bit greater detail. And what we'll talk about is the larger point. The larger point is that these two alleged crooks, and I'm almost reluctant to use the expression alleged. Allegedly are taken as read everywhere. They were able to steal so much money from where? From public sector banks, and then see how this reflects in the value of public sector banks and in the wisdom of government continuing to own banks in India. 12 large banks are owned by Government of India. They are the majority owners. It used to be 21. Government has done a good job of consolidating them. That's a reform, but that's only first step to a reform. In my book, government should not be running any banks, if at all. I take it that State Bank of India is one bank that in a country like India the government should own. That bank is large enough, but that bank should also be given management autonomy. And increasingly, we've seen State Bank of India getting a little bit more autonomy than before and doing better and better. In fact, if you ask me, I'd say the State Bank of India is the most improved PSU bank in India, followed by Bank of Baroda. So they can improve, but they are still government companies. The rest of them don't have to be government companies. Government can keep State Bank of India and let the rest be free and monetize the value of its shareholding and employ it to more productive purposes. That said, let me give you some basic data, and then I will come to the second part of this Cut The Clutter, which will be opinionated because it's also a hobby horse with me. This is something that I've spoken about in the past as well. Now, if you see the market cap of banks, I know market cap is not always the best measure, but these are commercial organizations. These are listed companies. So market cap can't be tossed as irrelevant. And then I know there will be other arguments, no, but public sector banks give money to the poor or to the farmers, etc. I will come to that as well. If you look at the value that the market has, just the value as of today of HDFC Bank, 13.824 trillion rupees, 13 lakh 82,450 crore rupees, almost exactly as much as the total value of all the 12 public sector banks, including State Bank of India. In fact, if anything, State Bank of India shores up the public sector banks with a market cap of 6.72 trillion rupees. SBI accounts for almost a half of the value of all the 12 PSU banks put together. Then if you see State Bank of India at 6.72 trillion, HDFC at twice as much, 13.82 trillion, a little more than twice as much. ICICI Bank again is 9.35 trillion. So you have two private sector banks which are much bigger than State Bank of India, and one of them is as big in terms of market value. All of this goes into India's market cap. Just one bank, HDFC, has as much value as 12 government banks. In fact, if anything, see some of the private banks, small private banks which have come up lately. AU Small Finance Bank, that is 41,000 crores. Bandhan Bank, 24,000 crores. Even these two are bigger than some of the old PSU banks, even after consolidation. And some of these banks have histories of several decades, if not almost a century. So once again, what is the lesson? The lesson is that the government should not be in business. I know people will say that, oh, private banks also have trouble. They have scams. Of course they do. Who can forget Yes Bank? But even today, after all its crisis, yes, RBI and the other organizations came in, they gave it capital, they saved it. But Yes Bank again today has market cap of 53,800 crores. And IndusInd Bank, the latest one to be hit by an internal scam, is 53,657 crores. Again, these are more valuable than several of the PSU banks within this group of 12 banks still owned by the government. And that's why, at the risk of making many of you yawn or go not again, let me again use that much spoken wisdom which I've used many times, all the time, with reference to the need for economic reform. Never waste a crisis. So many times have we said it. We lost the crisis of COVID, and a lot of the reform that was planned at that point was not carried out. Again, we have a crisis now with the US pressure and Donald Trump upending all of the global trading system and threatening global economic growth, etc. This is one more moment where government has to look at some fundamental issues. The reason this simple wisdom is really put into effect is that it needs boldness. It isn't an option for bureaucrats, time servers, or the risk averse. The reason we keep on saying this again and again is simply because Prime Minister Narendra Modi is none of the above. He's not risk averse. He's in fact the biggest risk taker in our politics after Indira Gandhi. And funny that the audacity we speak from him is to undo the most audacious and disastrous action of none else than Indira Gandhi herself. In her socialist push, as she split the Congress in 1969, she dramatically announced the nationalization of big commercial banks. Until the 1991 reform, more banks were nationalized. Anytime a bank acquired any size, it was nationalized. With all insurance companies also nationalized and development finance institutions becoming state-owned, she made the government's control of India's formal finance total. She was rewarded in election after election for her fake, wealth-destructive socialism, as she convinced the poor that she was hurting the rich. No such thing happened, but the poor continued to be fooled and she kept winning elections, even as the socialist riches looked more and more mythical until the oil shock of 1973 after the Yom Kippur War. And other changes pushed India's inflation rates into late 20s, in fact going above 28%, fully exposing her sham economy. Since then, India has been trying to regenerate the scorched earth she left in her manic socialist phase. She herself realized its folly, but too late, as we had examined in a national interest, of which I will share the link with you with the description. Political history tells us how easy, risk-free and lucrative state populism is, and how challenging, risky and usually unpopular it is to reverse it. The bravest of reformers take such pangas, which is walking into minefields, would be actually an approximate translation of pangas. Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh did some of this in 1991, and later Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Yashwant Sinha and Jaswant Singh. There was expectation of something more dramatic from Modi, and it's been there for 11 years now. He inherited in a near bankrupt state the banks that Indira had nationalized. 4 years after that, he was pumping fresh capital into them, throwing more taxpayer money after bad loans to India's richest, the most spoiled and corrupt. In fact, if at all PSU banks look a little bit in better health now, that's because of this recapitalization and also credit where it's due, consolidation by the Modi government. India's 12 public sector banks, they were 21, they were consolidated into 12. India's 12 public sector banks are still central to the country's finance. They account for almost 50%, if not more, of all of Indian market. Most are listed. In fact, at this point, all are listed in the stock markets. But note and hold your breath. All put together, including the Venerable State Bank of India, as we had explained to you earlier, are about as much value as HDFC Bank, which came into being just about 31 years ago. PSU banks, in comparisons, have legacies going back decades, in many cases more than a century. That's the kind of wealth destruction state-owned banking has carried out. Ask any shareholder in any company. If your management was so careless with your money, wouldn't you simply vote with your feet? You would, except when you are the government. What happened in the case of Yes Bank? The promoter, the leading shareholder got thrown out. So, as would happen with any other company, but most of all with banks which threaten to go bankrupt, which lose a lot of money because of malpractices, the owner or the promoter in this case lost their equity. Doesn't happen like that with the government, because government can print money. Instead of losing equity, they just print more money or They just print more money, which means take from the taxpayer and keep recapitalizing themselves because these banks are their assets. That's why when PSU banks have trouble, governments only throw in more money to perpetuate the disaster. Why? Because after all, this isn't your money, no? The money belongs to silly, gullible, unthinking idiots. So I will burn more of it to create the mythology that it will work to their benefit in the course of time. As with Mrs. Gandhi in her heyday, no such thing will happen. Maybe now with better management and better governance at the political level, PSU banks will not roll over as was the case in the past, but they will still underperform. And return on investment for the government or for the taxpayer or for the ordinary citizen, it will be a fraction of what they see in private banks. So why should the government be in the banking business? Governments have their own ways of managing things. Today, one person is in power or one party is in power. Today, it can be another dispensation and new pressures can come in and phone banking can come in as well because phone banking will come in as long as the state has the power over the banks. Then when phone banking's returns inevitably because state owned banks are there. If government does not own banks, then phone banking is a near impossibility. There will be exceptions, but it will be very, very tough in that case. If that returns with so many public sector banks still functioning, the only beneficiaries would be people like these jeweler Modis, Malia, although I will repeat again that he's returned his money, hundreds of other rich crooks in the past and present now selling back their unpayable debt at deep discounts that make lenders haircuts and understatement. In fact, most of them have already been through that process. Several of the lenders we've seen in the last few years, lenders as in banks, they've ended up with a Tirupati style mundan, not a haircut, a tonsuring, probably with just a tuft hanging. So uneven and unfair is this that some of the defaulters are now bidding to buy back companies they themselves bankrupted but at a heavy discount. Check out the Davos photo 2018 of PM Modi. Many of these notable figures are in that picture. Check out the meaning of the Yiddish word chutzpah. India's banking has gone through a bad debt crisis periodically. Mehul Choksi returning to headlines reminds us of that, and it's a sobering reminder. Check the dishonor roll of India's defaulters on any of these occasions, and you will find some usual suspects featuring repeatedly. The only reason this happens is they are again able to go back to the same Sarkari banks with similarly inflated project proposals and then they fail to pay, knowing that historically we've been an incredible economy where debt is utterly forgiving, equity isn't. The other factor, which is common to all these lists, is that I repeat all, barring the odd exception, all banks robbed by them were nationalized banks. Even from Malia, whatever money he may have borrowed from private banks, they had recovered their money in time before he left. That's why, whatever Mrs. Gandhi may have intended, her bank nationalization did not work for the poor, but has been brilliant for many thriving corporate legacies. Just look at it this way. If at half of any ratios you choose, like the size of your loan book, if government banks had a market cap even half of private banks, the Indian government and the taxpayer would be richer by some 15, 18 trillion rupees, if not more. To say that nationalized banks suffer because they lend to the poor or the priority sectors is to do the poor great disservice because the poor mostly pay back. The middle class always does, almost always does, and even the poor, especially farmers, if they can't pay, the government pays the banks once again to buy votes on election eve. So banks don't go bankrupt because the poor or the middle class doesn't pay back. Which takes me back 17 years at the peak, or you can call it the trough of the global financial crisis. Remember 2008 Lehman Brothers meltdown? On 13th of November 2008, Fareed Zakaria delivered the annual Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Lecture in New Delhi. While he complimented India's banking system for having escaped the meltdown that richer economies could not, Sonia Gandhi repeated the same point that Mrs. Gandhi's nationalization had saved Indian banking system at the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit later the same year, also poking the mostly suited audience to say, and I quote from her, "I know you people will not like what I'm going to say." The Gandhi family lays such store by the senior Mrs. Gandhi's greatest economic folly, bank nationalization, that it would be impossible for any Congress government to be even vaguely seen to be diluting state ownership of banks. Why Narendra Modi is bound by the same sentiment beats us. He has consolidated them but not privatized them. The most surprising thing about Narendra Modi is that he wants to reverse everything Nehru did, repudiate him altogether, but is shy of touching the most unwise policies of his daughter. There is no example of this more stark than bank nationalization. In 1969, she took over, asserting that these banks were only lending to the rich and ignoring the poor. In nationalization's 56th year, the same banks have shown us again and again that they go broke, get recapitalized, and they come somewhere there and they go broke, they keep on going broke because they gave too much money to the rich and got robbed. That's the deep, long-lasting flaw in our political economy that Mehul Choksi's return to our headlines reminds us of today. What will you call it? If you want to be lazy, you can call it irony. What would you call the political folly of continuing with this policy, but also every now and then throwing more money into it? 2.11 lakh crores the last time. That was after the Punjab National Bank and other scams. Punjab National Bank, by the way, was never a faltu, tiny cooperative bank owned by a political thug in Maharashtra's sugar belt. It was India's second largest government bank, a very close third now. The Choksi Modi scam showed it's been vacuumed by some of the world's richest thieves over many years, undetected by multiple audits. And that is the bank that many prominent freedom fighters of the early 20th century, including Lala Lajpat Rai, set up so that we natives will also have access to capital. And in a bank like this, these frauds went undetected by multiple audits or the board with government, especially finance ministry nominees. This level of leakage, lack of diligence and accounting and audit failure was just one mega national shame and embarrassment. That's why Modi government even now should dump it, sell it, forget it. It will be a very popular thing in today's environment when by and large people want government to get out of business. Also, Modi government itself has a fair amount of political capital that they can make use of. This will also give Narendra Modi the satisfaction of blaming for this, rightly in this case, the second most important member of the dynasty that he so detests. This opportunity is his to waste. Now, I know there is no big crisis in the economy right now. There is no big crisis in the public sector banks right now. But this is again a reminder of what can go wrong. And you know what? Once the system is so prone to leakages and so prone to misuse, in the course of time, it's going to happen. So if Narendra Modi government now can start this reform, maybe selling one bank at a time as opportunity arises, this will amount to building a great reform legacy for future generations.